Okay, we are live on Zoom and live on YouTube and live on Facebook. I'm going to share it on 2 more Facebook platforms, and then we will get rolling. Good evening, Kayla Gittel. Someone there? Because you waited all the way till the time when you're permitted to shave your beard. Because of 3 days before Shavuos, you're allowed to.
Sunday.
Who knew you were so religious, Mitchell?
I shaved last night. A friend of mine is getting his kid married Sunday morning. So he goes, I can't talk to you.
Okay. We are live. And the last share, and here we go. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, a happy Wednesday. It is 26 hours before we usher in the holiday of Shavuos. Shavuos gets a bad rap. And what I mean by that is somehow when Jews emigrated to America and decided to be sophisticated secularists, and they still stuck onto a Pesach Seder, they still stuck onto this, that, and the other, but somehow they dropped Shavuos, which is one of the 3 major Jewish festivals. There is Pesach, Passover, when we left Egypt. There's Shavuos, when God gave us the Torah at Sinai. And there's Sukkot, when we celebrate the miracles and the protection that God gave us in the Sinai desert. But Shavuos is a big one. It's one of the big 3, and we usher it in tomorrow night. We don't finish the full counting of the Omer until it's actually night, which is why tomorrow night we don't even start anything until about 9:45. But we're about to head into, it looks like God is about to give Bozeman the thunder and lightning from Sinai is about to kick in. But it's an important holiday. It's important to internalize the fact that God gave us a Torah. It's important to internalize that God chose us from all the nations to be a beacon of light, a towering beacon of light for humanity on ethics and morality and Torah values. And it's a holiday that we really need to recognize what the Talmud says. Ilav hay yom kagarm. If it wasn't for this day, kama Yosef ika b'shuka. How many Josephs would there be? Meaning, we'd just be another Joe the plumber. Nothing wrong with being Joe the plumber, but we would not be unique in our role, in our relationship with God, and the chosenness of Sinai and the chosenness of mitzvahs, if it wasn't for this day called Shavuos. Leaving Egypt was nice, but leaving slavery without having a plan, as we know from history, doesn't do very well. And the plan that God gave us was that when I take this nation out of Egypt, they're going to serve me at that mountain. Meaning the goal of the Exodus was step 1 was the Exodus. Step 2 was when they actually went to Sinai and they were going to serve God. And yet, in addition to being Shavuos tomorrow night, and if you're in Bozeman or in the Bozeman region, you better be here on Friday morning at 11 o'clock to hear the 10 Commandments and to afterwards to enjoy sushi cheesecake, which come after the 10 Commandments. It's Commandment 11 and 12, let's say, cheesecake and sushi. And then, by the way, Yom Tov's not over. Shabbos morning is Shabbos is the second day of Shavuos, and on Shabbos there's Yizkor. We also have the Yizkor service for our loved ones. But it also happens to be that this week we study the portion of Nasai. We're not going to read it this week because it's Yom Tov. We'll read it the next Shabbos, so we end up learning it for 2 full weeks. But Nasai is the longest Torah portion in the 5 books of Moses, which is studied this week and next week. And there's always a correlation. When there's a parsha with a holiday, there's a connection between the two. So we're going to address the connection. We're going to address the lesson from it. We're connected to the Sphere of Omer, and we're going to try to uplift ourselves in this final 26 hours before Yontif to uplift ourselves going into the holiday. So the name of the Torah portion is Nasi, and it's always the Parsha, or I should say it's usually the Parsha that we read after Shavuos. Yet in our unique circumstance this year, we're studying it the whole week, then we don't read it, but then we learn it another whole week and then we read it. So in Nasi, the first words are Nasi, which is, it can either in Hebrew mean to count, but the literal translation is to uplift. So at the end of last week's Torah portion, we spoke about the family of Kahas, that were the ones that carried the holiest of artifacts of the tabernacle. Comes along our Torah portion and says, Nasa Yisroish b'nei Gershon, you should lift up the head of the children of Gershon as well. Meaning, last week we ended with Kahas. Don't think it's just Kahas. You should also lift up the families of Gershon and then Merari. The word Nasa itself, which is the name of the Parsha, means to uplift, to elevate. And the reason we read that Parsha after the giving of the Torah, which is exactly what's going to happen this year, is because after the Torah was given to the Jews, they were able to reach a place of Nasa, of elevation. In other words, the Torah lifted us up and made us not be like everyone else. And so when you think about it, there's a reality that we can be status quo, or we can be in a place where we allow ourselves to go into a higher status. And that's a choice we make. Now, God made it easy in the sense that he gave us a Torah and told us how to do it. When you study Torah, when you do a mitzvah, you elevate yourself from the superficiality, from the physical, from the mundane. And at the same time, God demands of us that we should do it in a way where we are connecting with the physical. In other words, God gave us a Torah because he wanted us to elevate the physical world. That's why every mitzvah you're going to encounter is very much in the physical. It's not a spiritual mitzvah, it's a practical, physical mitzvah. And so, if you want to have that ultimate fusion, right? If you want to actually take something physical and elevate, there's two aspects to it, and it's very important. There's the God part, where he comes and inspires us. And then there's the part where we do our part to elevate ourselves into a state in which we can be a recipient of that. And that's why if you look at the beginning words of the Parsha, it's Nasi, lifting up. What's the last words of this longest Parsha of the Torah? Let me just turn to the end here. It says, if you look at it, it's on page 850, literally the last words. When Moses would come into the tent of meeting to speak with God, he would hear the same voice he heard at Sinai speaking to him from between the two cherubs above the covering, which was the cover of the Ark of Testimony. Meaning Moses was able to walk into the tabernacle, to the tent of meeting, and hear God talking to him. Now, what's the correlation between the beginning and the end of the Parsha? Says the Rebbe in 1989 in a phenomenal talk. He says there's two ways to deal with things. There's the ability to be able to walk in and hear God, to be a physical human being and hear God and feel God and see God. And then there's the part where God implants that on us. In other words, at Sinai, God came with this great revelation and sort of bombarded us with holiness. And that needed to happen. There is a time and place where God needs to bombard us, because when you're fusing the upper worlds and the lower worlds, sometimes you need a super infusion. But if you want it to last, and that the relationship in this physical world, our relationship with God should last, we need to do our part. What is our part? Nasai, to lift ourselves up. Which part of us? Rosh. Lift up our head. What does that mean?
Knowledge, skills, and determination.
What?
Knowledge, skills, and determination.
You just read that somewhere. But what does that mean? Very good. No, you're right. But what does that mean?
It's the mind, elevating.
So it's obvious that you have to elevate the rest of your body, your emotions and your physical well-being, your temptation. You have to control yourself. You have to be disciplined. You have to try to act in accordance with God. But that's not enough. We have to remember that as physical people, even our brains, when we're studying Torah, when we're doing the right thing, could be very much in a mundane, in a very superficial, mundane reality. It's our job to even our intellect, to lift it up to a place where we are comprehending things and yearning for things and searching for things and knowledge that elevates us to a different space. So when it comes to the holiday of Shavuos, and God does his part, what's his part this weekend? God is going to give us the Torah again like he gave it at Sinai. He gives it to us new. Right? That's why every morning when we say the blessing, we say, no saying our Torah. He's giving us the Torah. Not that he gave us, but he's giving us. That's God's part of making this fusion work, this relationship work. In every relationship, marriages, business relationships, parents and children relationship, there needs to be a two-way street. Otherwise, it's not a relationship. Relationships, by definition, are a two-way street. It's not equal what you give each other. Obviously, parents and children don't give each other equal gifts or equal energies. But you have to, it's a two-way street. It's meant to be. What's a two-way street between us and God? God gives us the bombardment of spirituality and holiness at Sinai, and then we have to do, that's why the Shabbos after we read Nasai, because Nasai teaches us that we need to do our part to uplift ourselves, including the highest faculty of the human condition, which is intellect, uplift ourselves so that we can be proper recipients of this relationship. And God says, listen, I want a relationship with you, and I know you're a physical human being with all the physical stuff, but if you do X, Y, and Z, learn my Torah, pray, do mitzvahs, do your best, give your heart, utilize your intellect through studying mysticism and Kabbalah and the deeper understandings of Torah, now you're uplifting yourself. If every American spent 5 less minutes talking about Thomas Massey and reading the news and the very fakakta news, every day everyone's busy with the news, and those 5 minutes turned off everything and just allow themselves to elevate their entire being. And it's not some kind of fluffy, it's practical. Take out a sefer, you go to your bookshelf, and if your bookshelf doesn't have a Jewish sefer, buy one. If you need a recommendation, email me. Take it out and start learning Torah without any distraction. Take out a prayer book and say a prayer. Take out your tefillin, do a mitzvah. Go visit the sick. Go feed the hungry. Go to a funeral and help bury another person that needs a blessing for burial. Help a kala get married. Achnasas kala, one of the greatest mitzvahs to help a bride contribute towards a bride who can't afford getting married, get married. Do a mitzvah, but do it without distractions. Elevate your mind, elevate your heart, and allow that fusion in the relationship between you and God to come to fruition. People kvetch all the time. I'm not feeling it, Rabbi. Why would you feel it? What did you do today? You ate a cheeseburger? Why would you feel anything spiritual? You stuffed your arteries with spiritual dysfunction. You daven, you learn, you did a mitzvah? No. From 6 in the morning, you've been on your phone, and at 12 o'clock, you walk around and say, I don't feel spiritual. What exactly did you do in your life that would make you feel spiritual? Comes along the parsha and says, listen, God is going to do his part. He's going to bombard you this Shavuos with spirituality and spiritual energies and vitality that you can't imagine. And every human being, by the way, God bombards us and gives us and gives us and gives us spiritual vitality. But what do we do with it? If we're not a recipient for it, where's it going to go? So we need to do our part to make ourselves a vessel for that. And this week's parsha specifically says the word Nasai, not regarding the tribe of the family of Kahas. Says it specifically regarding the family of Gershon, and Rashi, and the Medrash says, not the Rashi, the Medrash says that Gershon was mentioned, Kahas was mentioned last week in Bamidbar because the family of Kahas carries the ark, they carry the most important vessels. Now that we got Kahas out of the way, we talk about Gershon, which is odd because Gershon was the oldest of the three Levi sons. The order was Gershon, Kahas was the middle son, and Merari. And yet Kahas got chosen to carry, because of their status, they got chosen to carry the holiest of objects. And yet where do we see the word nasai, the word uplifting, the word elevation, specifically by Gershon? And Gershon were the simpletons. They didn't schlep the fancy. They weren't the ones who schlepped the holiest of objects. They schlepped curtains, right? I think Merari carried the beams, if I remember correctly. Where did I just read this? I was just reading it this week. Hold on. Yeah, for sure. They all carried parts of the tabernacle. Yeah, I was right. So right here, the Gershon carried the tapestries and the covers and the curtains. Yeah. And yet, even though they were the simpletons, they weren't Kahas. They weren't the chosen of the three sons, because the middle son, Kahas, got the highest level of vessels. The word Nasa, elevation, refers specifically to them to remind every one of us that this service that we talk about, this idea that we are meant to elevate ourselves in this fusion between us and God, is not unique to some secluded, elitist group. Even the most simple Jews who are willing to serve God have the ability, and they are recommended, and they are blessed to be able to make that happen. The Medrash says, the analogy that the Medrash gives for the giving of the Torah was that there was a king of Syria and of Assyria and the king of Rome, and they had a rule. The people of Rome are not allowed to go down to Syria. The people of Syria are not allowed to go up to Rome. And one day the decree was shattered, was broken, and now they were able to travel to each other. So the Medrash says that before the giving of the Torah, the higher world, spirituality and holiness, and the physical realm had no connection. There was no bond. In the days of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, during the time in Egypt, you couldn't permeate the physical world with holiness. You couldn't take a physical object and make it holy. That's why it was so unique when Abraham circumcised himself, because the only mitzvah available at that time that you could take a physical object and make it holy was circumcision. Besides for that, Shabbos, Tefillin, Yom Tov, Mezuzah, none of that was able to permeate the physical world. You couldn't take a physical parchment and make it holy by making it a Mezuzah. It didn't exist. You couldn't take a day like Shabbos and eat cholent and eat gefilte fish and make that a holy thing. Came along Sinai and the decree was over. God revealed himself, descended on Sinai. The Jewish people accepted the Torah. The divide was now removed. The higher worlds can come to the lower worlds, the lower worlds come to the higher worlds, and God does his part. God showers us with divine energy. We have to do our part so that this relationship can function, and how we do our part is by showing up, no matter who you are, whether you're Gershon, Kahas, or Merari, no matter what your intellectual abilities are, what your emotional abilities are, what your family history is, whether you're an elitist Jew or a simple Jew. Every single one of us has the ability to become a vessel for divinity and allow for this union of the groom, which is God, and the bride, which is us, the Jewish people, to get married and live happily ever after. But we have to do our part to lift ourselves up from the grime. It's like a groom meets his beautiful woman. Imagine a guy is walking down the street and he meets a beautiful woman, except she's a crackhead. And he says, listen, lady, I have love at first sight. But I can't marry you, and I can't take care of you, and I can't build a family with you if you don't clean up. You got to go to rehab. You got to stop. I don't know if you smoke or do crack. I don't know exactly the terms. You got to get off the crack, shape it up, and then we can have a relationship. God comes to the Jewish people and says, listen, you guys just came out of Egypt. You got a lot of flaws. You are far from perfect. You guys were on the 49th level of impurity. One more day, one more second in Egypt, you would have been toast. But I love you so much. As the verse says, I want to say Jeremiah, but don't hold it again. I think it's Jeremiah, where God says to the Jew, we say it on Rosh Hashanah during Musaf davening, Zacharti lo chesed nu'rai. God says, I remember the love of my youth. But not the love. I remember the kindness you did for me in your youth. What is the kindness the Jews did to God? So the verse says, Lechtech acharei b'midbar, you followed me in the desert, be'eretz lo yizru, in a land that was, nothing was growing there. It was a dead land. It was a desert. So God sees us. He sees the crackhead Jew and says, sweetie pie, I love you. I want to marry you, but you got to shape up. You got to elevate yourself. So Nasai comes along the parsha after Shavuos, and the groom says, I gave you everything at Shavuos. I gave you the energy. Now, my bride, you got to shape up, clean up, go to rehab. I'm giving you the instructions. You got a Torah, you got mitzvahs. Do it, live it, experience it, and we will live happily ever after. But there's a beautiful song that I grew up with as a child on that verse from Jeremiah. It goes, Koyomar Hashem, Zacharti lo chesed neurayich, Ahavas kluloi soyich, Ahavas kluloi soyich. It's so beautiful, the love and the kindness of our youth. And then it goes on a higher note. Lechtech acharei b'midbar, v'yeretz lo yizru. It's magnificent. If you ask me later, I'll send you a link and you'll hear a real singer sing it, not some rabbi that's croaking in Bozeman. But it's one of my favorite songs because not just the tune is beautiful, the words. God is saying, listen, guys, I know you're a bunch of screw-ups. I know the Jewish people what you guys are. But I love you. And I want to stick with you. And I want you to stick with me, but you got to shape up. And that's Nasai. Nasai comes along and says, yes, you're Gershon, and yes, you didn't get the hottest job in the market. You're not carrying the most important vessels, but you're carrying vessels of my tabernacle, of my home. And I want you to elevate yourself into that space. And it's apropos that in Montana, it's still the 48th day of the Omer. We didn't get to the last day yet because the sun didn't set. And the attribute for today is Yesod Shebemalchus. Each day of the Omer, we rectify a different emotional attribute of our soul. And the attribute of Yesod Shebemalchus means, Yesod always means connection or deep bonding. And Yesod Shebemalchus, Malchus is kingship. So it refers to a type of leadership, a type of kingship, which doesn't force you to follow the orders of the king, but the king influences you through connection, through bond, right? The king makes himself close to you, makes you feel valuable, that you want to follow what the king is instructing you to do. So you're not doing it by force. You're not doing it because he's a dictator and a tyrant. You're living life because you felt elevated by the king's interaction with you. And I referred a couple times this year to the new book I got from Rabbi David Lichtenstein from Lakewood. He says over there something very interesting. Rabbi Elyashiv, who was the chief rabbi of Israel for many, many years, a great halachic and Torah scholar, a posek. His full name was Rabbi Yosef Shalom Elyashiv. That he used to, any time a family asked him to come to a bris to be a sandik, to hold the baby, didn't matter if he knew them. He'd always show up to the bris. You're the big rabbi. The whole Israel's coming to you with questions. You have nothing better to do than bounce around to every. Now, not everyone asked him to come, but he understood. He never said this, but it was that by him coming to the bris, it's not just about the honor of holding the baby. It's about allowing that connection of Torah, the elevation, to elevate. We sometimes get so stuck in the grime. We have to make money. We have to raise our kids. And my car has an oil leak and the government's falling apart. The Democrats are Nazis and the Republicans are Nazis and the Libertarians are Nazis and the whole world is falling apart with Nazis because Twitter said so. And we get lost. And we forget that we're Jews. And Jews are meant to live in an elevated state. These noises come and go. Haman comes and goes. Achashverosh comes and goes. Antiochus comes and goes. Nebuchadnezzar comes and goes. Should I go to the whole list? All these animals that came, all these human tyrants that hated Jews. Hitler comes and goes. Khmelnytsky comes and goes. Right? If I would have told you 40 years ago that one day the Soviet Union would fall, you'd all look at me like I'm crazy. If I told you in 1988 that the Soviet Union would fall a year from now, in 1989, you'd all look at me like I'm nuts. And by the blink of an eye, the ganze Meise gang and fight and the whole thing went now. And now this little Yatzmach, this little yo-yo in Ukraine, who's his own parsha, we could talk about it a different time, but what's his name? Not Khmelnytsky. The president over there in Ukraine, Zelensky. I call him Khmelnytsky. He sits there with a remote control with drones, and he has the whole Russian government on shpilkes because he's sending bombs through drones. If I would have told you the big Russian empire, a guy with a remote control and a Game Boy is managing to blow up you think I'm nuts. So we get, oh my gosh, this one ran for office. This one, yes, we have to get rid of them. The Republicans yesterday got rid of that Chacham Massey. Have a good day. Now the Democrats have to get rid of that lady from San Antonio who said she wants Jews to be in concentration camps. That happened this week. And then you have this Chacham that just won in Pennsylvania, the Democrats. Rab, who said it was okay what happened in Sydney, Australia. So there's a couple of people, everyone has to get rid of their animals. It's their job. But to get worried about it a whole day? Elevate yourself. Nasai, where are you stuck? Rebbe Yashiv came to the bris because he wanted people to know that there's a different world we can live in. We can elevate the baby, not just for the circumcision, but elevate him to a space of Torah. And you can do it with dignity and leadership and influence without forcing it. And Rav Kook, the great Rav Kook, the chief rabbi of Israel, he used to visit secular kibbutzim. Now the kibbutzim in the 50s in Israel were communists. They were beyond secular. And he would go for a Shabbos to a kibbutz, right? He's the only religious person. The entire kibbutz, they were atheists, they were communists. He would spend the whole Shabbos with them. He would talk with them and talk to their kids. But the only thing he couldn't do with them is eat with them. He would give them a lot of respect, but he couldn't eat with them because nothing was kosher. So he'd bring his own food. He never ate in public. He ate privately in his own apartment. On Sunday morning when he was leaving the kibbutz, they all felt so loved by him. And they knew that, he respected them for who they were. He didn't look down at them. He was dignity. He would turn to them and say while he was leaving, next year when I come back, let's eat together. It was a little beautiful way where he was telling them, and the minute he would leave, the people in the kibbutz would already start brainstorming. How can we make sure that next year when the chief rabbi comes, we can have a kosher meal that we can all eat together, and he can join us for a meal as well, so we can really be together. He didn't threaten them, and he didn't bombard them, and he didn't say you're bad. He didn't look down at them. He realized that they were where they were for whatever reason, and there's a lot of reasons for that. They came from Russia, they came from Ukraine, they went through hell and back, and they grew up under communism and under socialism and under Marxism. This is what they believed. And he knew they needed to change. But you don't change people with tyranny, even if it's religious tyranny. You change people by showing them you respect them, and there's Yesod Shebemalchus, that there's I care about you genuinely. And with that genuine care and love and respect, I can lift you up. And I'll leave you with one last anecdote. And that was for Moshe Feinstein. Actually, it was funny. I was in D.C. last week for ZC's graduation trip. And she was on the trip, and I was walking with my friend Rabbi Steiner, who's the Chabad rabbi at GW. So we were walking from the kosher restaurant, which is called Char Bar. There's one Fleshik restaurant in D.C. We had lunch there. And we were walking back to this Chabad house on campus in a neighborhood called Fagi Bottom. It's an interesting name. As we're walking, I have to guess the woman is probably in her 60s. She says, are you the rabbi? I still don't know if she was talking to me or to my friend because we're both rabbis, but he answered. He's the local guy. And she basically, like a good Jewish woman, within 5 seconds, the hello turned into a 12-minute conversation. And basically she says, I just moved here a year ago to be near my daughter. And if you want to know who I am, my father was one of the first students of Rav Moshe Feinstein's yeshiva, Tiferes Yerushalayim, Mesivta Tiferes Yerushalayim in Manhattan. And he actually married us. He was Masada Kedushin at a whole Megillah about Rav Moshe Feinstein. Rav Moshe Feinstein was the posek. He was the halachic authority of America. And all rabbis, including the Rebbe, always consulted and recommended people to consult Rav Moshe. In Rav Moshe Feinstein's building in the Lower East Side of Manhattan, which is where he lived, he was one day going into the building, and one of his neighbors from the other apartments was a Baal Tshuva, someone that didn't grow up religious, who was now religious. And he with innocence beyond, walked up to Rav Moshe and said, could you attend a siyum that I'm making? A siyum is when you complete, normally it's when you complete a tractate of the Talmud, the entire Mishnah. A siyum is when you finish something big. So Rav Moshe said, what are you making a siyum on? What did you complete? He said, on a daf of Gemara, 1 page of Talmud, it took me a year. And Moshe said he would happily attend, and he did. Now think about that. If you went today to some schnooky yeshiva student who sits the whole day in learning, and you told him, I want to make a siyum, a celebration, and a meal, and a festive meal, because I'm making a completion on what? And you say a page of Talmud, guaranteed, either they're going to burst out laughing in your face, or they'll hold in their laughter because they're kind, but when the minute you walk out of the room or they walk out of the room, they're going to burst out laughing and have it's a good butt of a joke. But Moshe didn't laugh. A Jew spent an entire year studying a page of Talmud with diligence. It took him a year. That's no matter to laugh at. That's something to celebrate. You know what kind of diligence and devotion it takes? Rav Moshe understood that you don't elevate people by putting them down. You elevate them by expressing dignity and respect and leadership, not because you're a compromiser, but because you recognize that human dignity above all. How do you uplift? You start by uplifting your own brain and your own heart to live in an elevated state. And when you live in an elevated state, your ego isn't as important anymore. And therefore, you're able to elevate other people with you. You know who takes people down? People who have taken themselves down. They feel down. They don't respect themselves. They have no self-worth. So they figure if I'm down, I got to take everyone with me. You know who doesn't take people down? People who have they have confidence, they have self-worth, they have self-esteem, not ego, but they're comfortable in their own skin. They don't have to take other people down to make themselves valuable. That is the message of Nasr. On Shavuos, God bombards us with holiness, but then he says, listen, guys, I need you to elevate yourself as well. And when you do that, it can not only benefit you and our relationship between God and the Jewish people, the bride and the groom, but it'll benefit the rest of the family as well. Basically, we're saying to God, or God is saying to us, if you elevate yourself, then not only will you have a good relationship with me, the groom, but you'll have a relationship with the rest of my children, because you'll have the ability to uplift others as well, because you've uplifted yourself. You can't uplift others when you're in the gutter. You can't help an addict if you're an addict too. It has to come from someone who's not in the same addiction, that can see with clearer vision and will help you out. Right? But that's why there's a term in the Talmud, Ein chavush materis atzmai, that an incarcerated person cannot free themselves. I know on TV you think prison break is a real thing, but Judaism, Ein chavush, an incarcerated person cannot free themselves. You need someone from the outside to free you. And so when we uplift ourselves, we get more clarity, we get more devotion to God. Our relationship with Hashem is stronger. Then we have the ability to look at the rest of His children and say, wow, I can help you too. Not because I'm some superhero, because I have the ability to share with you the same upliftment, the same nasai, the same upgrade that I've done for myself that I can do with you. That takes work, that takes effort. But I believe, and the Torah believes, and Chassidus believes, that Shavuos teaches that in the relationship with Hashem, it's worth the effort and energy to do our part so that this relationship should be rock solid, and we should all experience an incredible Yom Tov. And as the previous Rebbe and then later the Rebbe would say with the blessing for Shavuos, Kabbalas HaTorah b'simcha b'pnimius, may we merit to receive the Torah with joy and internalization. L'chaim, and we shall see you back here next week, Wednesday, Be'ezer Hashem. And if you're not here for sushi in the sukkah, if you're not here for sushi and cheesecake, I'm coming for you. Sei gesund.